Today, the League presents the candidates for the U.S. Congress District 2. This forum is co-sponsored by Area 1 Agency on Aging and the Humboldt Senior Resource Center, and will be recorded by Access Humboldt for later viewing on local channels and online. Candidates for the available seat are Norman Solomon, John Llewellyn, Dr. Susan Adams, Tiffany Renee, William Courtney, Jared Huffman, Andy Caffrey, Larry Fritzlin, Dan Roberts, Michael Hallowell, Stacy Lawson, and Brooke Clark. Any candidate may put his or her answers to the agency's questions on the website and on the League Smart Voter website when the call goes out for that information. The League policy does not allow stand-ins to replace candidates at a forum. The moderator will announce the names of those candidates not attending, with reasons if available. Jared Huffman is out of town because of a prior commitment to the Jerry Mello Foundation, and he sent his regrets. Brooke Clark also sent his regrets. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is dedicated to providing impartial information to voters about candidates and the political process in order to help them make informed decisions. This is part of our citizen education program. The purpose of a candidate meeting is to give citizens an opportunity to hear the candidates' views on a variety of issues. The League of Women Voters and the Area Agency are both nonpartisan organizations and do not endorse candidates or political parties. We hope that you will give the speakers your careful attention and will refrain from any demonstrations of support or opposition during the forum. We will thank all the candidates with our applause at the end of the forum. For today, the program will be as follows. As moderator, I will introduce the candidates and begin the question period. The agency board of directors has formulated 4 questions, which each candidate will have 2 minutes to address. Candidates have drawn numbers for that speaking order. After we have addressed all those 4 questions, we will take written questions from the audience. Our ushers, Carol Ziskin, your hand, Carol, and Richard Lehman. Richard, have cards for you, and if you will raise your hand that you want a card or that you have a card with a question on it ready to be picked up, they will take care of that for you. They will bring them to our question sorters, Kay Escarda and Helen Huey, who will eliminate duplications and questions of a personal nature. Our timekeeper is Nan Niebuhr. Nan? And she will be timing the answers. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question after we start with the written questions that you have submitted to us. And at the close of the question period, each candidate will have 1 minute for a summation. Now, again, I ask you to turn off your cameras and your cell phones, and that is, the League wants to ensure that information is not manipulated to create false or misleading impressions. No candidate should be allowed to use or edit footage for any campaign purposes. We have more candidates today than I have ever dealt with before. We have prepared questions for them, and they will have a total of 8 minutes for those 4 questions, not all at once. Each question, we will hear from all candidates for each question before going to the next one. I have asked them that if they do not need their full 2 minutes or 1 minute later, that they not use the full time, because then we will get to more questions from you, the audience. They informed me that they're not known for being short-winded. And I have a question for the audience. Please listen carefully to all the answers so that you can formulate questions that will not repeat what we've already asked and will maybe go deeper into a subject if that's what you would like. Finally, this is my my problem, of course. I'm using a random grid for the order of answering questions. It has 10 people on it. It's designed so that every candidate will have a chance to be first or third or second or ninth or whatever sometime during the afternoon. And they chose numbers randomly to find out who would be first for it. So I have been known to mess up when I have only 3 candidates. So please don't be shy. Candidates, let me know if I missed you. If I go to another question and you haven't had a chance, please tell me, because it happens. So let us now begin. With us today, we have Dr. Susan Adams, Andy Caffrey, Dr. William Courtney, Larry Fritzlin, Michael Hallowell, Stacy Lawson, John Llewellyn, Tiffany Renee, Dan Roberts, and Norman Solomon. We will begin, first question, which is, we begin this with Larry Fritzlin, and the question is, what do you feel are the federal programs that are most important to older Americans outside of Medicare and Social Security, and why? Larry?
First of all, my name is Larry Fritzlin, and I have to say I'm a little bit nervous. This is the first debate that I've been in. So, I think that a civilized country is going to put the care of children and the elderly and the disadvantaged primary, and unfortunately this country is way down the list. And I think that the core underlying problem is what goes on in Washington. 90% of us distrust Washington. And my position is to get money out. After that, there's a whole lot of things we can do for the care of the aged. We can protect them from online scams. We can protect them from robocalls. We can enforce the elder abuse laws. We can also, I'm a big fan of going green and being able to provide adequate transportation and services that are available. I could probably talk a lot longer on that, but I'm going to stop right now. Thank you.
Thank you. The same question, Andy Caffrey.
Hi, everybody. Well, I'm going to admit that I feel uneducated to the level that your next congressman or congresswoman should be on the programs that you have dealt with. I'm not a senior citizen. In fact, I'm going into this as a representative of the community. I expect to hear from you to tell me what programs you think are the best. Now, part of the reason for that is I do a lot of work almost every day with homeless elderly people. So I know a lot of the programs that don't work. And my overall program is about something called New Green America. It starts with the climate crisis as basically a crisis that we have not attended to. And if we do not attend to it on the order of magnitude required of us, and in time, we are leaving our kids and our grandkids a wiped out planet, a wiped out civilization, and even a wiped out community. I work on the climate issue specifically related to polar ice. And with 1 foot sea level increase, it would tear apart Eureka itself. We're looking at situations that could cause 20-foot sea level increases. So my priority is, how do we deal with that? How do we create a future for our kids and grandkids and for the rest of the world? So part of that program is a crash effort like World War II to get off of fossil fuels and nuclear as fast as possible. Now, in order for Americans to get behind that, we have to have an expanded social safety net. We have to make sure everyone is taken care of. Because if people aren't taken care of, there's just going to be too much chaos. So I believe that Social Security and Medicare and the other programs are grossly inadequate. I think you'll find, perhaps not with the Republicans, but everyone else here, we're going to fight for Medicare, Social Security, and all the programs that are there now. But I think we need more, and I think we really need to take care of those seniors who are the least among us, those who have lost their money, lost their home, and sometimes have to live on the street.
Thank you. Next, Norman Solomon.
Well, thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. My mom worked for the League of Women Voters for many years as a volunteer, and it's very moving for me to be here today. I wish she could be with us, although she is in spirit. Her dad worked as millions of people did, to create and support the New Deal. And we have the legacy of the social compact that for seniors and really everybody needs to be protected. A healthy society is going to mean all of us are nurtured. I've been co-chair of the Healthcare Not Warfare campaign. Healthcare is central. I want to fight for more funding for the federally qualified health centers, such as Open Door. We need a lot more funding for those facilities. Let me mention a few aspects that I think have a lot of impact on seniors, although it isn't often obvious or mentioned in the news media. One is the post office. A lot of seniors rely on the post office. Look at this very destructive idea to close down the mail processing facility here in Eureka and merge it up to Medford. Losing jobs, might take 2 or 3 days to get mail that is now taking 1 day. That's a disservice to seniors, especially who aren't on the internet, but really for everybody. Also, food stamps, now called the SNAP program. Very important for nutritional assistance. Way back, before I pulled myself as a young person up into middle class, I relied on food stamps. And decades ago, as you can see from my gray hair as a young adult. And this fall, I took the food stamp challenge and lived for a week on $4.50 a day. And to see, again, how difficult it is to do that, we need more funding. Section 8 housing vouchers, very important for seniors, not nearly adequate in terms of funding. Also, HUD reverse mortgages. Let's not let the predators come out here and offer reverse mortgages. HUD should be doing that. We can trust them, but they need a lot more funding. Finally, energy assistance, very important for federal funding, and I hope we'll get a chance, my time's about up, but to talk about more of this as the afternoon goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany Renee?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us today. I come at this a little bit differently, having been a caregiver for my grandmother who was suffering from a fatal illness for about 10 years. I can definitely understand what the challenges are for our seniors and for the caregivers who are caring for them as well. She was fortunate in that she had my grandfather's pension and benefits. Those health benefits and that pension is what allowed her to age in place and keep her sustained until her death. And the importance of that cannot go unnoticed as cuts and challenges to benefits and pensions are coming further and further. We're going to end up seeing the ramifications of those decisions later on. And so being able to protect those pensions and benefits will be very important to not creating more of a burden on our already taxed system at this point. We also need to look at other programs that can help seniors, as many are having to go back and be retrained and retooled for the workforce, looking at employment programs and things like Senior Corps, which are also volunteer programs that can benefit seniors and allow them to do things and be out in the community. One of the great services that Petaluma has is Petaluma People Services, and they do Meals on Wheels and assist seniors in aging in place. And those kinds of programs continue to get cut. And as we see that cuts happening in the community, people have to step up more and more. So replacing that funding and ensuring that those types of fundings continue is vitally important. Things like the HUD program and ensuring that seniors have affordable housing is something that I've been championing in Petaluma as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Susan Adams?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have invited the 12 of us. I call us the Dirty Dozen. We're the traveling family circus as we're going up and down the coast, having opportunities like this to get in front of you. And as an active practicing healthcare provider for 33 years, I'm a women's health nurse practitioner, I'm a professor of nursing. Healthcare is where I swim better than I think any of the other candidates here. And when you ask the question about what other programs besides Medicare and Social Security, I would say those programs that help our seniors be independent. And I've been working as 10 years on the Marin County Board of Supervisors in ensuring that our in-home support service workers are able to still provide those services for our seniors so they can age in place. Transportation is really important as our seniors need to get to their medical treatment and their care. And as we're seeing more cuts in transportation, big fights in Washington right now about allocations of funds with the federal program for transit. And the housing issue. We not only have HUD and Section 8 housing, but senior housing facilities that are federally funded. And when I also am working on our senior population, focusing on a unique population, our veterans population, sometimes connecting our veterans who are aging with the services that are available to them through veterans programs can help make the difference between their ability to live independently or be out on the streets. And I was able to wrangle 35 Section 8 housing vouchers out of the feds specifically for our mentally ill offenders who were also veterans who are chronically homeless. And we've had a great deal of success. A number of these individuals are actually becoming stabilized, dealing with their addiction issues, and actually moving into the regular housing market. So there's a lot of work to do. I bring the local government lens to this, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Stacy Lawson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Stacy Lawson, and I want to start by just thanking the League of Women Voters and the Agency on Aging and the Humboldt Senior Resource Center, and thank you, Bird, for being our moderator, and a warm-hearted welcome to all of you for being here this afternoon. Thank you. A few of us were with Lynn a couple of weeks ago at an event, and she said, "Is there anyone not running for my seat?" So as you can see, there are many of us interested in being your next representative. And I come from a small town called Port Angeles, Washington, a little logging, fishing, and coastal town, much like Eureka. My grandmother was a nurse, and my mother is a public health worker. So she runs, she's the administrator for the public health officers for the state of California. And healthcare for older Americans has been something that's been part of my family lineage and a concern on our minds for a very long time. So in addition to Medicare and Social Security, I think one of the most important legislative things we have in place is the Older Americans Act. And this is an act that actually is focused on helping our older Americans be independent, stay in their communities, and have the care they need for as long as they can stay independent, and then make sure that we're taking care of them when they need to go into more assisted living. And that legislation is focused on things like Meals on Wheels, caregiver support programs, transportation, services that allow seniors to stay independent, promoting health and disease prevention. So a lot of times, especially as our population ages, we're seeing chronic disease like arthritis and osteoporosis and diabetes and others, that if we can provide preventative care, will actually allow our seniors to stay healthy and to stay independent longer. So these are the kinds of programs I think we need to be continuing to find federal funding for, and making sure that the Older American Act is not only stays in place, but also is expanded for our senior citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Roberts.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being here, and I do thank you for coming. This is probably the biggest that I've seen of the turnout, so it's done a good job, organizers. By way of beginning, maybe I'll start at the beginning. I'm a 40-year resident of this, the merged district. I live in Tiburon 40 years, raised 3 children there. So I'm close to the southern end of the district. I'm learning about the north, so I'm coming up here more and more, and I'll be happy to come back. I have in front of me, just by way of introduction, I've got a Constitution. I've got about 50 of them. You're welcome to take one after the meeting. I have my push cards here, and I've got my money cards if anybody is so inclined. So, but in terms of the question, I want to say that 3 things. Number one, the tax policy, that's spending and taxation is my big issue. I come 40 years in finance, so I come from that side. That's where I bring value to this mess, this financial debacle that we have. So I would like to, I'll buy into the Ryan program and drop the rates and broaden the coverage so everybody pays a little, not some pay all. The VA, I take advantage of the VA. I'm the only veteran here, I think. Unless you're a veteran, I don't know. Are you a veteran? No, I'm the only veteran running. And so I've been close to the VA since the Vietnam War, and I use their facilities. And for those veterans up and down the coast, I'm sorry we don't have a closer facility. I heard from the bus driver on the way in, he has to go to San Francisco for any kind of expanded coverage. So I think we can do better than that. And my heart would be with the veterans. Thirdly, tsunami early warning system. You heard the progressive liberal administration is cutting that funding, and I think that puts the coast in danger. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. John Llewellyn.
Oh, good day. Yes, it's wonderful to be here. I'm 69 years old. I'm one of the rural seniors. There are, I believe, 13 of us candidates. That's 12 apostles, but I'm afraid there's no savior. There's no savior. I came out of my cabin. This is hard work I'm doing. I'm an independent. I'm seeking unity for fundamental reform. One of the reasons I'm doing this work is to inspire you, because we're all going to have to work hard. I think that our country has fundamental problems. We won't be able to solve any of our problems unless we all get to work a little bit, and then we can do it. I think the most important thing we have to do is achieve peace conversion, where we stop spending all of our money on enemy-creating and destructive military activities and put it into all of the meeting human needs programs that we have. I believe that this is the most important task, and I'm working on making a National Peace Conversion Act, and I'm inviting you to join with me and work on it. Go to my website and we'll organize this. In terms of specific programs for seniors in Humboldt, I'd say that the two things that I would focus on is getting some federal aid for hospice in Humboldt, because the way that the federal aid is set up, it only works in urban areas, and we need that. And also I found that in-home health care services, their hours have been cut back, and they only make $8 an hour. So this should be funded better. But as I say, unless we all get to work together, we're all going down together. So please join with me for fundamental reforms, whoever we choose to send back to Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Dr. William Courtney.
Good afternoon, and once again, thank everyone for putting this together. This is a graph of the aging services that have been slashed, and you notice that those that have not been are in the minority. There's not enough time to even list these, yet alone address the issues. As a physician, I have an office in Humboldt, two offices actually, one down in Redway, one in Eureka. 50% of my population is senior, most of them at the end of the medical treatment facility. They come in with on hospice with multiple medications, and it's been my job to attempt to get them off those medications. Personally, a mother with Alzheimer's, an extended care, horrific condition, as was her grandmother and my great-grandfather. So I'm particularly focused on that condition, and the federal government has a patent on cannabis and identifies Alzheimer's as being one of the conditions for which it's quite useful. Going forward, as the baby boomers move into the age of entitlement, there just are not enough people to supply the services that we are expecting. That's going to create a tremendous crunch, particularly as we bring out the conflict with the Republicans around possible funding of national security. So it's going to be a very interesting year as they attempt to pare $600 billion from services as well as from the military. And we'll begin to understand why Congress currently has a negative 3% rating. Cancer is 1 to 2. So as congressmen, we've slipped below cancer in terms of approval rating. I look forward to taking these concerns to Washington on your behalf and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mike Hallowell.
For the vulnerable senior citizen, the food stamp program is the most important. I disagree with my fellow college professor Newt Gingrich in ridiculing Barack Obama as being a food stamp president. Food stamp program is probably the best welfare program it is because it combines the interests of the producers in maintaining a stable demand for their products. Those of you who may have remembered the Depression when you were very young or had relatives who told you about it, they were basically pouring milk in the gutter in order to support the price. Far better to pour it into the mouths of people who need it. I, in fact, would increase the food stamp program subsidy 15% for senior citizens who are on no other welfare program, because there's so many of them rely on prepared foods, which is so much more expensive. And keeping body and soul together is of vital significance for them. And people do want to continue to be active. As you get older, there are more disabilities. I would take the disability programs and have model programs where you had one workstation, a person was blind, another deaf, another maybe physically frail, and working together they can get the jobs done instead of having this very expensive tailoring a workstation to a particular disability. But the most important thing for our age group isn't what is about ourselves. It hurts our souls to think that we may be the first generation to leave this planet in worse shape than we found it. This deficit spending is doing is kicking a can down the road. We don't want that. We're not these greedy geezers you hear about. We're not the ones in it just for us. And we need to stop this writing these blank checks and taking all the revenue to Washington. Let's leave more revenue here in this state where the local people can use it. Lord knows our budgets need it.
Thank you. Our next question begins with Tiffany Renee, and the question is, the number of older Americans will grow significantly in the next 5 to 10 years. Please tell us what role you think the federal government has in their care and welfare. Tiffany?
Thank you. As a local government representative, I'm vice mayor in Petaluma. I have seen the devastating effects of the increase in healthcare costs for our public servants. And one of the ways that we can address this is to expand Medicare. I'm a big supporter of universal health care, and we need to continue to fight to protect the Affordable Care Act. There's certainly some big challenges coming ahead around that issue. And so depending upon what happens with that, we're going to need to address other ways to expand Medicare for all. One of the ways that I've been suggesting we do this right away to be able to assist local governments to keep the services that they're providing locally is to expand Medicare for all public employees and their families. And this is a way of bringing dollars home back to the community, as we're seeing, 10, 12, 15% annual increases every year. Those are cuts to other services that communities are being providing to you. And so bringing that money home and expanding Medicare is going to strengthen it for people that are already on it, and provide that local dollars for being able to improve our quality of life here at home. Then we can continue to provide those essential services that we talked about before, affordable housing, Meals on Wheels, aging in place. All of those are very vital to increasing the quality of life for all Americans. And so Medicare for all is the way to go about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Roberts.
The question is number 2, number of older Americans will grow significantly. How can the federal government help in the care and their welfare? I think with this House situation, and as Mike has mentioned, with the focus on cutting spending, at least not increasing it dramatically, the reality is that the federal resources in many areas will be limited. And so let's think about how we can accomplish things with different ways, different ideas, alternative solutions. Because the days of free money from the federal government are over. Those days are over. If you read on my website, Enough's Enough, please look at it, danrobertsforcongress.com. It talks about pulling from the middle. We've been doing it for too long, and for many years, and entirely too long, we've been pulling from the middle. That is, each House member, through carve-outs and other earmarks, pulling money from the federal government. And so there's no, it's all gone now, right? We've spent it, we've had a good time, and it's all gone. So now the reality is the communities need to do community-based solutions. I think that's what part of my answer would be, do more community-based solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. William Courtney.
There's currently 3.5 million seniors living in poverty, and as the baby boomers join that crowd, that number's bound to grow. There needs to be support for housing. Along with that comes access to food stamps, facilities, and participation in society is huge. Seniors have tremendous experience. Tying that together with people that could use that gives everyone a chance to exchange information and to feel part of the solution. We also need to look at where we're going to shift focus. And this could be, like I said, it's going to be very difficult this year as we try to decide how we pare back further in the domestics. And there will be a tremendous drive to take the deficits or the cuts headed for the military to switch them over to domestic. And without a strong representation, that 1.2 trillion will be coming out domestic if it's at all possible. So the person that you select has to be someone who is able to kind of wade into this war. And I've been doing this for quite some time. I've had my offices burned to the ground. I've had my bank accounts closed. I'm familiar with playing out there. And this is going to be, the next couple of years are going to be a time when preserving safety nets is going to be a very full-time and probably almost dangerous job.
Thank you. Larry Fritzland.
The elder that are going to be coming, are aged in the next 10 years, I'm one of those. And I think that I'm also a family therapist, and I work with, I run a rehab for adolescents and young adults, and I work with the families to help these young people get out of addiction. And so I look at systems, and when I look at our country's political system, I see a dysfunctional system. There is an elephant in the middle of the room, and the care for the elderly is expanded to the care for all of us, children and everybody else. We all know what happened in the last 4 years with Wall Street taking us down. We need to deal with that elephant in the middle of the room, which is the corruption in Washington, the fact that our politicians are on the take, and that has led to the 1% getting wealthier and wealthier at the cost of all of us, and it especially impacts the vulnerable, the children and the elderly. And so I agree with a number of the people on this platform here, that there's some fundamental changes that need to be done. This is not about rearranging chairs on the Titanic. It's not. Talking about this little program or that little program, to my mind, makes me insane. We are on the Titanic. We are headed for the iceberg. We need to make fundamental change. For me, that starts with getting money out of politics. I think that almost all of the politicians in Washington are on the take from the special interest, from the 1%. That's the problem. That's what we need to deal with. Everything else, to my mind, is rearranging the furniture on the Titanic, and we need to deal with that. It's impacting our environment. I totally agree with the gentleman to my right here. The oceans are getting more acidic from the carbon that's going into them. Fish are stopping to reproduce. The polar ice caps are melting. The permafrost, if the permafrost melts, it's going to release a huge amount of methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And no matter if we stop immediately burning carbon, it might be too late. These things need to be addressed. But right now, the oil industry and the 1% are running our politicians. We need to change.
Thank you. Norman Solomon.
Thank you. Well, from the outset, I want to say the federal government has a responsibility to take responsibility. When this economy was in a ditch in the time of the 1930s, the federal government stepped up and said, we need a New Deal. And for 15 months in this campaign, I've been saying we need a Green New Deal where the federal government is willing and able to do the magnitude of public investment that's necessary to help seniors and everybody else have the kind of communities and society that we want. The state, the county, the cities cannot do sufficient public investment. Only the federal government can do it. And we're having the same debate today, essentially, where a lot of the deficit hawks in the 1930s said, oh, you can't do that. You can't establish Social Security and unemployment compensation. It means fighting for what we believe in. I'm an independent, progressive Democrat. And by the way, from the outset of the campaign, we have refused to take a dime of corporate PAC money. Any lobbyist sends us a check, we're going to send it back. I want to mention that we've been fighting for not only defending Social Security, but expanding rather than retracting the COLA definition. Because rather than saying, should we keep it the same or make it even less adequate, COLA needs to be expanded by interpreting the economic data more properly. We have a ad here that we took out 9 months ago, and we just reprinted it here. It says, cutting Social Security and Medicare is not fiscal responsibility, it's betrayal. And we need to push our own party, the Democratic Party. And by the way, I was elected as an Obama delegate to the 2008 Democratic National Convention. I support this president when he's right. I'm going to challenge him when he's wrong, including when he has put Social Security and Medicare on the table and the knives are out. That's not right. We have to speak up. We need to push back. We need to insist that the federal government has a responsibility, even when our own party leaders are saying, no, we're going to meet the right wing halfway and start carving up these sacred programs. These are sacred trusts, social compact. We must not give ground in defending them.
Thank you. Mike Hallowell.
Medicare for All is a contradiction of the basic rationale of the whole program, which is to, when you have replenishable assets, you pay a large chunk of the cost of Medicare, so that when you are in retirement and you can no longer add to your assets, you are protected in your health. Doctors are able to offer Medicare to their patients because they charge a little bit more to their patients who are still in the workforce. You have to have a viable private sector to make Medicare work. And the viability of the private sector is under attack right now by the Obama administration. Some of you must have been watching the discussion in the Supreme Court about this. One of the worst things in the Affordable Care Act is what they're doing to young people. They're letting them stay on their parents' policies till they're 26. Bravo, failure to launch, back in the parents' nest. They don't want that. They want to let their kids get out on their own, and they would be able to afford health care if they were only charged the actuarial costs of the few diseases that they get. When they say they're trying to have this public mandate, personal mandate to prevent freeloaders, that's partially true. But they also want to gouge young people and pay them twice or 3 times the cost of their insurance. And this age group has less income on average than any other in the workforce. And so I hope the Supreme Court is strong enough to defend the Constitution and declare Obamacare unconstitutional. If not, the Republicans should repeal and replace it with something that is more equitable across the board. We need to allow freedom of choice, freedom to purchase insurance across state lines for what you really need, and we'll have much less of a freeloader problem.
Thank you. Andy Caffrey.
There are several ways in which I'm completely different from the other candidates here. First of all, I don't start with the premise that we take the system we have and then push it a little bit more in one direction or another. That's called reform. I don't think we can reform a solution to the climate crisis. Can you hear me okay? Okay. The problem is too big. I was looking at Dr. Courtney's list and added a few things myself: veterans, pensions, food stamps, Section 8, security, and by that I mean in your neighborhood and in your home. I also don't think that the only concerns of seniors are about themselves. I think they're very concerned about their children and their grandchildren. My sister committed suicide several years ago, and my mom is in a situation where she has to basically make up for the economy up in Seattle where she lives, and she's taking care of my niece and nephew. More than half of the college graduates now are returning home. This economic system is a failure. And one question you should be asking yourself is, can this economic system be reformed? Are we going into a double dip? Or is it collapsing? Now, the fact that we haven't made the cost-cutting measures we have to make to deal with the climate, that we haven't considered things like running out of resources like peak oil, means that we haven't even been hit hard. So what I'm saying is we need a new paradigm based on wellness and compassion. I don't know what a freeloader is. I know that there are people outside in my neighborhood who die in the winter because they don't have shelters. So I work to get them a shelter. I don't care how they live their life personally. I want them to stay alive, and I want them to be part of a community. So what I'm talking about is we will define the things that we need. We will stop this piecemeal approach and make sure that everybody has health care. Yes, Medicare for all. Health care is a right. In tribal societies, the medicine person and healer did not deny health care to anybody. It's only in a modern society where it's all been mechanized and pulled away from culture where we have to parcel it out, give veterans some and non-veterans others. Seniors some, middle-aged people none.
Thank you. Dr. Susan Adams.
Thank you. Kind of lean to the left. We will be judged by how we treat our children and our seniors, and the decisions that we're going to make in terms of our finances. And it's one thing to make promises and platitudes about what you're going to be doing. It's another thing to actually have been in the trenches for 10 years dealing with it. And as a local elected person, we've been having to deal with the impacts of cuts on state and federal funding and how it impacts not only our seniors but our children and our whole communities. And we've found creative ways locally to do this. And your representative needs to understand that it's not state and federal government that fixes these problems. We're doing it at the local level. We have wonderful creative programs here. Federal government needs to help assist us to be able to do it and not create obstacles for us to not be able to do it. The money isn't all gone, contrary to what was stated, but it's how we're spending it. When we spend $10 billion a month on a war effort, when we're providing subsidies to oil companies, when they've made the highest profits ever in the depths of a recession, when we are not letting the Bush tax cuts expire, and just go back to the Reagan tax cuts. The Republicans loved that when it happened. So let's go back and start getting the funding that we need back into our communities. And we need to protect our Medicare and our Social Security. It's a promise that we made to the people that have been paying into this system. The reason Medicare is challenged is because it's a single-payer system, but it's a single-payer system for our oldest, most disabled, and most infirmed people. And it's unconscionable that in this country, the number one reason for bankruptcy is because somebody gets sick and needs health care. And so a single payer or a Medicare for all approach, you also get to take into account the whole spectrum of payers. People that are on Medicare like their Medicare. They don't want, when you saw the seniors picketing saying, keep your government hands off my Medicare, you know, that was a powerful statement. So health care for all, and we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that allows our local governments and our local community providers to deliver the services in a way that meet the local community needs.
Thank you. John Llewellyn.
Yes. Well, I believe we're all in it together, that we're all really responsible for each other. I see the whole human race as like one living creature, and we're all should be taking care of each other. The federal government is one way that we pool our resources. We really have to work together to try to stop this madness of military imperialism, this 700 billion plus thing that's leading us to war and depression. This is our key task, I believe, in order to meet our responsibility to take care of ourselves. And it doesn't matter who you elect, we're going to all have to be very active and working toward the changes that we really all need. We need a tax structure that taxes more on the ability to pay, that taxes corporations, that closes the corporate loopholes. And we need to reform a financial industry that too much is based on just sheer gambling, meaningless assets, and then getting the Federal Reserve Board to print trillions of dollars to bail them out. We need these fundamental reforms. And then at our level, as I go around and campaign, people are like myself and my wife, we're being driven out of all of our livelihood money by medical costs. This is one of the most expensive medical systems in the world. It leaves all kinds of people uncared for, and it doesn't deliver a good result. I believe that we cannot give up on trying to get a single-payer health care passed. And there are several of us who advocate that, but we won't get anywhere without millions of people demanding single-payer health care so that everyone will get basic health care needs taken care of. So I'm asking everybody to go to singlepayernow.net and sign up. and maybe we can get out of some of this problems. And I really have faith in our country that we can do it.
Thank you. Stacy Lawson. Okay.
Is the technology's okay?
Mm-hmm.
Got it? Okay. Well, I was hoping that I would actually get on the random grid that Bird's doing, I would get to speak after my colleague here, because I think this notion that somehow we don't have the money to fulfill our social contract is a wrong idea. That we live in a country that has had a social contract that says we take care of one another, we take care of our veterans, we take care of our seniors, and we take care of our neighbors. And we do that by being strong together. When I was growing up, my grandpa was a mill worker. He worked in the mill for 30 years. My grandma was a teacher, my other grandma was a nurse. And my dad started a small trucking company. He worked really, really hard. And all the families in our community worked really, really hard. But there were times when there was no work, and he and his guys had to rely on things like uninsurance or unemployment benefits. That was just the way it was. And through his hard work, we moved from a trailer in the woods into the middle class. So for me, that's where my progressive values came from. That his business was built with handshakes and relationships in the community and integrity, and that's what we need to have a strong country and to grow a middle class and to preserve and protect our middle class and to restore our economic prosperity in this country. It's what I've been doing for over 20 years in economic development. Now, that's the basis for continuing to also have the resources we need to make sure that our social safety net is strong and that health care and programs for our most vulnerable citizens are in place. So we have a situation here where the Administration on Aging estimates that the aged population will be growing by over 15% by 2015. 90 million Americans will be over age 65 in the next 30 years. And so we actually need to be investing in programs that take care of them. I'm a huge advocate of single payer. We need to be moving to a healthcare system that can pay or that can provide healthcare, universal healthcare for all of our citizens, for everyone who needs it, and do it in an affordable way that doesn't break the bank so that our social contract can be preserved, that our progressive values can stand, and we can have an economy that's strong and a country that's strong.
Thank you very much. Our next question begins with Dan Roberts, and the question is, long-term care, especially that provided in skilled nursing facilities, has largely been paid for by the state. With the surge in the elder population, the decline in the economy, and the humane call for care, how do you think the federal and state government should address this impending predicament? Dan?
Yes, thank you. Well, you're hearing from a number of candidates, including myself, that there are limits to the federal government's ability to pour out free money. We said that earlier. It's really true. What we've been so I'm running a truth campaign, right? So you hear the truth from me, and I'm not going to pander, and I'm not going to overpromise and underdeliver, which happens all the time. That's number one. Number two, health care is a state's issue. It should not be a federal issue. It's best addressed at the state level. Now, we backed into it years ago at Johnson. You got this Medicare program through, but it's really should be, I think it's better addressed at the state. And the answer is to get the government out between the doctor and the patient. That's the prime contributor to successful health care, is the doctor and the patient. It is not the federal government with its committee dictating who's going to get what kind of treatment when. So enough of that. And secondly, in terms of long-term care, it might be, I'll give you an alternative here, for example. That is, you have an intergenerational responsibility that's been pushed away. But it used to be that Grandma and Grandpa lived with my mother and my father. We took care of them. I had 3 boys, right? And I hope they're going to take care of me, push comes to shove. That's why I had a family. Now, I will tell, I'll let you know later on that one, but it's an intergenerational responsibility there, and the more the federal government comes in and intervenes in these private agreements, the worse it's going to get, and that covers many, many things, including education, health, etc., on and on and on. So you look to the families, look to the communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Hallowell?
I think it's vital that the federal government continue to be involved in Medicaid, which is the most important program of which is the long-term care aspect. That more of the funds go into that than any other. God help the poor senior in places like Mississippi if there weren't a Medicaid program where there could be some adjustments so that the people in the wealthier states could help to pay for this. But we can't keep paying for it the way we are now because of the increased number of elderly. And that means that we really have to raise the normal retirement age for Social Security for those who can work to continue to work a few more years so that your number of years in retirement is in reasonable balance to the number of years in the workforce when the program was started out. However, there are some people, particularly people who joined the workforce early, and have really been ground down by the jobs that they have because they are mainly unskilled jobs because they haven't put in the training, and that's why they joined so early. They should be allowed to keep the contributions beyond the years that count towards Social Security. I think it's something like 35 years. That's the basis of your Social Security benefit. Anything beyond that, typically your earliest years when you earn the least, just don't give you anything at all. These people should be able to keep those contributions in a personal retirement account that they could invest in a little 401 type K thing that would give them the flexibility to retire early if they needed to and have assets to apply to their needs otherwise. But once we have adjusted for the people in the physically demanding part of the workforce that can't continue to work, we need to have those who can, particularly the highly skilled elderly. We need their tax contributions not only to help the budget, but to have the medical advances so we can all live longer. As a society, live longer, work longer, retire all of us early, we will all die sooner.
Thank you. Andy Caffrey.
I couldn't disagree more. There's plenty of money. I'll tell you exactly where it is. 1979, the top 1% had 8% of the national wealth. Now they have 23%. Okay? The money that the other 99% have has diminished. And the reason we're in this economic crisis now is that basically it's diminished so much that the buying power of the middle class to keep the engine going has puttered out. So what's happened is we've gone into a situation where a caller on Stacy's community call, whatever you call those, Stacy, called to tell us that, do you know how many high schools in the 6 counties of the district have shops, machine shops? 4, and there's 1 full-time teacher. Used to be there were 40. Okay, this is not trimming the budget. This is gutting the institutions of our society. Okay, that's why we have to say we're not just going to accept the paradigm that the Democratic and Republican establishment have presented to us. We're going to sit around and decide, well, what is it that we really want to take care of? That's why I'm saying we have to change from this, which side are you on, which little, benefits do you get because of how you live your life, and these other people, these so-called freeloaders, well, we'll just kind of let them disappear. Well, that's the shadow self, as Jung talked about. The problems that you kind of put away from, your attention and hope that they'll fix themselves out. Well, they don't, okay? 4 years ago, I saved 3 people's lives by simply organizing with my neighbors a homeless shelter using our radio station. If the states were going to do something, they would have done it. They aren't. We can't count on the government. And lastly, I would prefer to have the government between me and my doctors over a multinational corporation between me and my doctor. Oh, one other thing. Healthcare involves a lot of other things, and your welfare, the welfare of all seniors, depend on things like clean food, not putting pollutants into our bodies that make us sick and give us cancer. So I'm very big on cleaning up the community, cleaning up the environment, and preventive care, as well as having the full benefits and the full safety net that we all need.
Thank you. Dr. William Courtney.
There are 33,000 Californians in skilled nursing facilities. It's been estimated that 89% of those wish they were not there. Probably those that are there that wish they were there probably have bigger problems that we're not really discussing. There's a Class Act is a movement to provide funding to allow people to. There's a Class Act is a program that allows funding to be available to have people be able to stay in their homes. It's much more affordable to be in your home, but it's an organizational issue. There's obviously a lot of political action behind skilled nursing facilities. There's a lot of money being paid in a similar kind of analogy. The federal government is paying money to have infants removed from endangered environments, and they now consider cannabis an endangered environment, so you get $6,000 to $12,000 if you pull a child out of that type of environment. In the senior arena, the skilled nursing facilities sometimes have had quite a bit of fraud and corruption, and we need to monitor that closely. But obviously the best way to go is to encourage people to stay in their home, provide them with support, and give them some activity that they can become engaged in. Another thing that's very important is prevention. Number one cause of death is cardiovascular disease. Federal government has a patent. Federal government has a patent on cannabis that reduces the size of a heart attack by 66%. That as a standalone drug would make Viagra, a second in line in terms of gross revenues. It also reduces diabetes, insulin dependent, by 58%. The federal government is aware of that in their patent. So prevention can go along with a plant that we're very familiar with, and recently we've introduced some new strains that are high in CBD, and these are phenomenal in their ability to reduce inflammation. It's actually being used by the FDA for the treatment of psychosis. We should take this as an advantage and lead the nation with the idea that we can prevent a lot of medical conditions.
Thank you. John Llewellyn.
Yeah. Well, my research on this topic, there are 9 million people now who need long-term health care. It's going to be 12 million by the year 2020. About 40% of these people will need a nursing home, and 70% will be taken care of by friends and family. So the entire spectrum of government programs is important. I believe that long-term health care for people is a basic right that we all have. It's a right that everyone has, along with single-payer health care for all, that we as a single society, we should provide this for each other. I really think that this is our responsibility, and that we should all work to so that we'll meet this responsibility and not throw away our money on the deadly wars that we're causing and the other gigantic losses. This will take everyone's work, and so I'm hoping to inspire you to get into this work along with me and several other people to try to achieve long-term health care. And in this county and other places, the subsidy of in-home services is really important, because this is what keeps people from having to go to these facilities. And this should be subsidized greatly by the federal government. As I mentioned before, the hours are being cut back. The in-home service people are only paid $8 an hour. So we should really take responsibility for each other, I believe, and work together to meet everyone's needs.
Thank you. I've been asked to repeat the question in case anybody has lost track of it. So the question, again, is long-term care, especially that provided in skilled nursing facilities, has largely been paid for by the state. With a surge in the elder population, the decline in the economy, and the humane call for care, how do you think the government, federal and state, should address this impending predicament? And we go to Tiffany Renee.
So coming back to my grandmother and the story and the experience of caring for her long-term in her home, I have found that to be of huge value, and addressing the issues of preventative care are quintessential. It's something that allows people to live longer, live happier, live healthier. And the way that we can do this is to expand Medicare, bring home our military dollars to help pay for that, keep our services locally, and be able to provide for those services that help people prevent disease in the first place, providing healthy access to healthy food, farmers markets, all of the alternative types of medical establishments that help people stay healthy as well. These are all vital to increasing our elder population's quality of life at the end of their life. And at the state level, the way that we address it is with in-home health services. At the county level, I was on the Commission on the Status of Women, and we prepared a report on the status of women in the county. And this was 5 years ago, actually 7 years ago. We saw that women in poverty were going to be increasing in huge numbers in Sonoma County. And so to address those issues of being able to stay at home and have your family member take care of you, in-home health services is the way that that can happen. So the state needs to continue to provide those services, and where they can't, the federal government needs to come in and subsidize that as much as possible. This is what allows people to stay with their families and to get the best care. I think, so do my aunts, they all wanted me to care for them when they became too elderly to care for themselves as well, because of the great care that I provided.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next, Larry Fritzlin.
I agree with one of my colleagues up here that I would rather have my family taking care of me than the government, and another colleague that says I'd rather have the government taking care of me than the corporations. I'm a mental health professional, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I deal with managed care. It's managed uncare, and it just doesn't work, and there's a lot of reforms that could be done there. Gandhi said once, we have enough for every man's need, not enough for every man's greed. What we have now, there's plenty of money. For instance, General Electric last year had $4.6 billion in profit and paid not a penny in taxes. We have wars that are spending immense amounts of money that I don't think are necessary. Washington is dysfunctional. I'm listed as a Democrat. I've leaned that way, but I think I'm more of an independent. I think both the Republican and the Democratic parties are, they're like feuding adolescent gangs. They're not capable of sitting down and working things out. It's interesting, I have a website, Get Money Out of Politics, pledge.com, and my pledge is not to accept money from any source other than individuals, and then only $100. And there's a website called opensecret.org. They get the information from the FEC, Federal Elections Commission. I'd invite you to go there and find out where my opponents are getting their money. And Norman, I would suggest you take a look, because they show that you're accepting money from a political action committee. You might want to get that corrected.
Thank you. Stacy Lawson.
Thank you. So I want to go back to the question here. And the question is about, with our increased aged population and a larger percentage of older Americans, how do we prepare ourselves for offering long-term care to our citizens who need it? And I think there are two questions on the table. One is the economy. How do we get the economy going again so that we can actually fund those programs? And then two, what do we need to do as it relates to health care to make sure that all citizens are taken care of? So as it relates to the economy, this is something that I've been working on for over 20 years. I've been in economic development and job creation. I've actually co-founded the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at UC Berkeley. I have the honor of teaching our bright young people about how to innovate and to create new thriving businesses that are all creating jobs. We spun out over 18 companies from the center, all with young entrepreneurs at the helm. And so as part of that work, we've been involved very deeply in policy. And I would invite you all to go to our website and check out our document called Making More in America. This is an economic development plan for this district, saying how do we actually create a small business landscape that can thrive? How do we put more folks to work? How do we invest in sectors and in infrastructure that can be the sectors and that can stimulate our economy and provide the jobs going forward? So I don't have time to get into that in 2 minutes, but I would encourage you to take a look at that. And then as it relates to the healthcare piece, I said earlier, I'm a strong advocate in single payer and moving towards a universal healthcare system that can take care of all. We know that the cost of in-home care on an annual basis is about $10,000. The cost of going to a nursing home is over $75,000 a year. Right, so there are programs that we can put in place at the state and federal level that allow us to allow our seniors to stay independent, to stay in their homes, to get the care they need, and to get it at a lot lower cost than other alternatives, either going into nursing care or going to emergency room, for instance, if they need it. Those programs are critical to bringing down the cost of health care so that we can take care of everyone.
Thank you. Dr. Susan Adams.
Thank you. I have very deep roots in this district, unlike some of the other candidates who've only lived in the district a couple of years. I've been with my brother on the South Spit fishing. I have a fourth generational heritage of a Mendocino ranching family. And my brother who lives in Carlotta, and I share a father with Alzheimer's. And as he is progressing in his disease, my father, who likes to fish also, is considering with the family moving here to Humboldt so he can be closer to family. And one of the issues is what kinds of services are available, not only for our aging father, but for the family care providers who take a great deal of the responsibility for taking care of them. And I think the most cost-effective way of providing services for our aging family members is in their homes, which is where most of them want to be. In our county, we have actually provided a living wage ordinance so that our in-home support service workers can actually make a wage that works for them and have medical benefits. Now, the state, in their wisdom, is proposing cuts to in-home support service, and then that then translates into more burden on local government to try to backfill that if we're going to keep those promises. I also just want to comment quickly in my last minute that, we spend 2 to 5 times more money on our healthcare system than any other westernized country, and we live 4 to 5 years less than the other countries do. So we don't have a system that's working. I know Dan wants to get government out of the relationship between the care providers. I want to get the insurance company out of the relationship between my patients and them. And I had a woman that had a breast cancer, a massive lump, and it was the job of that insurance company for an hour on the phone with me to tell me all the reasons why I couldn't do a biopsy on her breast because she wasn't 50 years old yet and didn't qualify for that procedure. So the way it's working now is not working, and we need a program where our Medicare and Medicaid will help to support us throughout our lifespan. All of us get an opportunity to have access to health care.
Thank you very much. Norman Solomon.
Thank you. First, just a brief comment. Part of leadership is listening carefully and speaking accurately. As I said today, and I've said throughout the 15 months of our campaign, I don't take corporate PAC money. I think Wall Street is a poison in our political process. I'm very proud to have support from unions and from the Council for a Livable World and their Peace PAC. I believe in peace, and I believe in unions. And by the way, I'm very proud that I'm the only candidate in this race to be endorsed by not only SEIU, but also AFSCME. Unions are a force for good, for health care, and for equity in our society. I'm very proud to be a union member. Now, IHSS and home support services in general are vital, and the question gets us to a very key point. It's so much more expensive and so much more disruptive and so much less humane in so many cases to take people out of their homes when we could have adequate funding to keep them there with very, very good care. And to leave it to the states and then to have the states say, oh, we can't pay you a living wage, but you're supposed to come in and take care of those people, that is wrong. We've heard a lot this afternoon about single-payer health care. I and many others here support it. The main bill for single-payer in the U.S. Congress has been authored and mainly sponsored by Congressman John Conyers. He is co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. I've co-chaired with him for several years the Healthcare Not Warfare campaign. He's endorsed me in this race. John Conyers has endorsed me in this race because he said publicly that he wants me at his side on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives fighting for single-payer health care. It's not about just talking about it. I've been working for single-payer now for decades. It's about lobbying, speaking, organizing, educating. We've got to get the job done together.
Thank you. Our next question is the last prepared question. We will begin with Mike Hollowell. The question is, Where do you stand on the issue of federal support and funding for public transportation such as bus and rail transit systems, nonprofit transportation services to special groups such as the disabled and senior citizens, as well as other alternative forms of transportation such as biking and walking?
Transportation is probably the issue where local control is most important, and centralized control is maybe destructive because of the opportunity to take some out for pork barrel spending and that sort. I've run several times against Lynn Woolsey. Most of the Democrats here are competing to follow in her footsteps. I opposed most of all one of the first important votes she ever cast, and that is the one vote margin to impose a massive tax increase in 1993, and there was a 4.3 cent addition to the gasoline tax in that. I would repeal that and leave that for the localities to collect the money if they wanted to increase their gasoline taxes in like amount, or for heaven's sakes, maybe leave some for the hard-pressed motorist in this day with soaring gasoline prices. But what happens when you gather up all that gasoline money is that you kill these individualized projects that the focus of this question, because if you have some money left over from your transportation funds to encourage people to ride the bus by subsidizing the fares, please do that. A lot of people cannot afford cars, but even those who do, when I ride the bus, I'm proud when I look up and see how little pollution the bus is producing per passenger mile compared to any other way of getting about. And we want to protect the planet, we want to protect the autonomy and ability to maintain their membership in the larger community of seniors. Maybe we want a little bit of room for bike trails, and maybe we want to have some encouragement in insurance policies for people to stay in shape so that they live longer and cost less. All of that can happen if we have more local control.
Thank you. Dr. Susan Adams.
Thank you. Just to correct Norman, I'm also endorsed by the SEIU. They did do a multiple endorsement on that one. But I am a multimodal transit supporter. I ride my bike to work, not so much during this election cycle because the miles from Marin County to Humboldt are a little outside of my capacity as a grandma. But I also take public transit. I'm very committed to that. And in my role as a county supervisor, we were able to get $25 million out of the Federal Transportation Agency, the FTA, for a non-motorized bike ped, all modes for all roads program. And we have now a beehive of activity of wheelchairs and walkers as well as bicycles and strollers going through an old railroad tunnel that had currently been abandoned, and bike and pedestrian and pathways that are accessible for people with wheelchairs with the right grade. And as we're doing this, we're seeing more people getting out of their cars. I've had success with that. We also have rural transit partnerships with the National Park System. And so we're providing transit for those people that live in the hard-to-reach places so that they can use the public transit to get to where they need to go. Experience does count in this, and I have the experience that money can't buy. And we've talked a little bit about the money, but I also think that one of the important aspects is the relationship with the regulators. And I've been to Washington many times and have relationships with the people that are making the decisions about how the laws are interpreted, which then determines how the money comes to us at the local level. So again, I bring the local lens. I know where the money's hiding. I have a good relationship with the people in Washington so that I'll be able to deliver the goods for this community when I'm elected.
Thank you. Stacy Lawson.
So we know that by 2015, over 15 million older Americans will actually be living in communities that don't have great access to public transportation. And that's a critical part of how we keep older Americans in their homes, independent and self-sufficient. So I'm a huge advocate of public transportation and federal funds to do that. I also think it's a part of our recovery in terms of this economic climate that investing in infrastructure like our roads and bridges and public transportation systems are a critical way to get people back to work, to replenish our communities, to create economic opportunity, and in this case also to be going green, to actually, part of part of what we've been doing at Berkeley is a lot of work around a green energy future. How do we get off our addiction to fossil fuels and foreign oil and start to have green technologies that can take us forward into the future? So things like hybrid bus fleets and alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles and battery technology that can help in that realm. Those are all important innovations that can actually not only improve access to public transportation, the quality of public transportation, make it more sustainable, and make sure that our elder population has those resources available, as well as our thriving communities up and down the North Coast.
Thank you. Norman Solomon.
Thank you. Well, as an aside, maybe because I'm a journalist, I have a training in accuracy, and apparently I've misheard by at least one of my colleagues here who I admire very much, Susan. I want to repeat what I said before. It was accurate a few minutes ago. It's accurate now. I'm the only candidate in this race who has been endorsed by both SEIU and AFSCME California. I got a solo endorsement from AFSCME in the state here, which I'm very proud of. Believe in working people. I believe in unions, and that includes for public transportation. And like healthcare, I believe that transportation, and I live in a rural area. My wife Cheryl and I live out near Tamales Bay. It's a terrible thing to be left to the untender mercies of the market when you need public transportation. It's not working. And the federal government is the only entity that can provide the public investment to really provide what is often not only a convenience, but a quality of life and even a life and death matter for people living in rural areas for transportation, and for that matter, urban areas as well. For instance, I've gotten to visit the Mendocino Transit Authority, and they're raising money to bring in new buses that are non-polluting and can go from the urban areas like Ukiah out to the rural areas. $600,000 for a hybrid bus, $1 million for an electric bus. We need more and more of that, but it's not going to happen if we simply let the federal government off the hook and we say, hey, well, let Humboldt County, let Eureka, let other counties and cities and states scrape for money when one budget one year is worse than the year before and is not as bad as the next year. We know where this is going. It's an unacceptable spiral down. That's why I'm such a proud New Dealer. We've got to fight for these funds and make it happen out of Washington so we can do what we know has to be done here.
Thank you. Tiffany Renee.
So I actually am on the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, which is also our Regional Climate Protection Authority, where we are working and striving very hard to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We have set the goal very high in Sonoma County, and so working on infill development so that transit is easier to access by all has been an important part of that. And additionally, I'm also on the Golden Gate Bridge District, the Highway and Transportation District, which provides bus service from the Golden Gate up through Sonoma County. So we're also a one-car family, and in a rural county, I understand how difficult it can be to get around. My husband spends about an hour and a half every morning getting to work and an hour and a half getting home from work. So, the importance of transit doesn't go unnoticed in our family. So we've been striving very hard to ensure that we bring back the funding that has been cut from our county budgets and our local city budgets. As well, I've been working hard to protect our paratransit services and improve our local service so that when people in the community need to get to and from the doctor's office, it doesn't take forever. And when they are facing big challenges in their life, they have bus drivers that in a way are also doing casework, ensuring that people are getting to and from where they need to go and are receiving quality service when they are commuting around the area. So these are vital, important services, and I've also been a big proponent of multimodal transportation. So trails and trains are very big and very important in the North Bay, and so wherever we can provide multimodal access is going to be a great way to help people get around.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question. Where do you stand on the issue of federal support and funding for public transportation such as bus and rail transit systems, nonprofit transportation services to special groups such as the disabled and senior citizens, as well as other alternative forms of transportation such as biking and walking? And we go to John Llewellyn.
Well, I just love that senior center bus that comes over and picks me up at my cabin and takes me for $5. It's so great. And if you elect me to go to Congress, you can expect me to work with you to subsidize federally all of the transportation needs that you know that you have and that you need here, whether you want to convert old railways to bike trails or have transportation for seniors subsidized. We'll need road improvement. So I really do believe that a lot of our solutions come from you, and I believe that the federal government has a responsibility to help out with that. At the same time, if you go and elect me to Congress, it will be the beginning and the end of big money politics. I'll tell you that for sure, because I don't have it. And if I go to Congress, it'll be because you're lifting me there. And I think that we need the big bills, the big laws, like the National Environmental Policy Act is a great one. I'm starting to write already the National Peace Conversion Act. We need a National Energy Conversion Act. And these things solve all of the big problems that we really have. We have the global warming problem caused by carbon emissions, and that's solved by going into renewable sources of energy and maybe not having to go so far. I think that we need a massive federal overhaul of our entire transportation infrastructure. I read somewhere the other day that nobody's making rail cars in the United States of America anymore. If you want a rail car, you got to go and buy it from China or somewhere. We have got to turn this industrial base around from an industry based on war machines to one based on peace.
Thank you. Dr. William Courtney.
We have a Clean Air Act, we have a Clean Water Act, we need a Clean Energy Act. We need to unseat the oil industry, which has a stranglehold on Congress, the executive branch, and the globe. And this form of transportation is a good first step in that direction because it consolidates the production of these hothouse gases that are looming large on the environment. Clean energy would involve hydrokinetic with 600 miles of coastline. This district would probably be the most unique in the world in terms of being able to provide CO2-free energy, switch the public transportation systems over to magnetic and electric. Individual cars would be electric, house heating, construction would be electric. This is going to be essential if our children are going to have a future. As more focused at the question, obviously transportation is essential for everyone, for remaining active, for getting to services, for feeling independent. And I believe the federal government needs to lead with both the technology, one that's compatible with a future for our kids and our children's children, as well as setting up some precedents and design assistance for small communities which may not be able to put the whole thing together by themselves. So if you're interested, one of my major positions is on this clean energy, and we're working on a clean energy amendment because it will take a constitutional amendment to move beyond the oil industry, without which the Congress will certainly protect the oil industry's investment in combustion, and combustion we know is incompatible with the future for us as well as for our children.
Thank you. Andy Caffrey.
Have you heard the news that as of the 2010 census, the United States is no longer a middle-class nation? We now have more poor Americans than middle-class Americans. Now, right now, the Democrats are colluding with the Republicans in Congress to let them gut the kinds of programs that we're all talking about, well, except for the Republicans, they're talking about expanding. So realistically, I don't see how any of these things are going to be expanded until we deal with this fundamental problem. Transportation, health care, the needs of the poor are not intellectual exercises for me. where I live in Garberville, and I am the only candidate who's lived and worked in all 6 districts, and the only one who lives in Humboldt County. And 9 of the 12 live in Bay Area counties. So there, the median income is $85,000 a year. Here, it's $35,000 a year. We're sort of the third world of the district, and we're going to be treated that way unless someone who has lived through the experiences that we're living through is in Congress. We had no bus service at all for years in Southern Humboldt. I was one of a handful of people who fought and organized, and we now have a bus service that goes down at least Monday through Friday. I also know that we had no service to the south. So one of my priorities would be so that you could take public transportation from Crescent City to San Francisco. Right now it basically stops at Fortuna. I also think that the market, depending on the market for these services, is ridiculous. That we have to make a decision that there are certain things that we support. Just like we decide we don't charge people to become soldiers, we don't charge people to become firefighters, the rest of it. We decide that these are things that are important and we want to take care of them. And I feel that way about health care, I feel that way about senior care, I feel that way about daycare, I feel that way about people who are in high-risk jobs, like firefighters, policemen, and soldiers. And I've also used the quail. So I know that we had only 2 days a week for years when elderly people and disabled could get up to Eureka to see their doctors. This is just not tolerable.
Thank you very much. Dan Roberts.
Thank you. So Susan Adams mentioned earlier that I do want to get the government out of a position separating the patient with the doctor. And I also want to remove the insurance company from that position as well. So I take the Republican line that we've got to empower the patients to shop, and that'll drive down the costs. There are a lot of other provisions, but I won't go into them now. The other point is that by now you might have guessed that there are 2 Republicans running, and the rest are all independents or Democrats. So in the broad scope of things, I'm running as a conservative Republic, and I'm moderate on social issues. So that's why I focus on the debt and the deficit, spending, taxation, and we haven't talked about it yet, but we can also talk about illegal immigration and the border. So that's my position on the bigger issues. On health care, the federal health care programs, if you've read the local press, they're all going bankrupt. The last thing we need is a single payer. We don't need to get our feet deeper in this mire. We need to pull them out. And we've got to think about other solutions. So my campaign is about other solutions, fresh look at these issues, other than the liberal progressive wing that has been pushing things for the last few years with Obama. So I'm running against that. I'm trying to present the electorate, and with your support, get a different view, a fresh view, different answers for some of the problems. And by the way, on transportation, I wish that you guys would talk about how the fare box can cover the cost. I'm thinking about private sector solutions. If you're looking for the federal government to subsidize your local transportation, ain't going to happen. The House just cut high-speed rail out of their bill, and it's not. Yes, okay, I'm over.
Thank you very much. Larry Fritzland.
The federal government does play a role, and I can imagine the federal government stepping up and doing amazing things like they do in China and Europe around the green movement, sustainability. But what we have right now is the corruption, both left and right. Harry Reid recently said that he was in favor of the Keystone Pipeline because of the jobs that it would create. And we know why the Republicans are in favor of the Keystone Pipeline. I think that Lynn Woolsey, who I voted for, 39% of the millions of dollars she got from unions. How does that impact her ability to make a decision as to what she's going to vote for? I think that this is part of the problem. We have in Washington corporations, Wall Street, big oil with their money, and on the other side we have the Democrats, their special interest, and unions. We've got to get past that. We've got to get money out of politics. My pledge, not to take money from anybody except individuals and then in small amounts. As long as we have the Republican establishment buying off their leaders and giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the same thing on the Democratic side, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting. We need something new. There's some people up here with some great ideas, and I think democracy rocks. This is so cool. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now at the point where we're going to look at the questions that you have submitted. We have a great many of them, but a lot of them have addressed some of the things that our candidates have already talked about. We will not have a great deal of time for questions because it takes 10 minutes for them all to answer. They'll have 1 minute for this. So I'm trying to pick some that have not been addressed. And the first one is, what specifically will you do to improve the climate of cooperation and civility in Congress? And we begin with Andy Caffrey.
Well, considering I think that most of the Republicans and probably 2/3 of the Democrats in Congress are psychopaths, that's not exactly my course. I will, however, be civil, and I will encourage people to be civil, but you can go to war and be civil as well. Yeah, I mean, what's happening is you have a bunch of people who are conscienceless. That's why I'm calling them psychopaths. It doesn't matter if they actually are so much if they're acting like them, if they act like they have no heart, if they don't feel what you feel. So I basically believe that we have to take a stand for morality, for compassion, and wellness, and that is what our politicians should be talking about, not how much we can cut this versus, you know, Republicans want to cut this and the Democrats want to cut it just a little bit less. So civility will come when we are actually providing fruits that show that we're civil.
Thank you. John Llewellyn?
Well, I'm part of the nonviolence movement. I believe that nonviolence is the basic revolution that the world needs and is getting. As an independent, no party, seeking unity among all, I try to campaign in a loving and nonviolent way. I really admire all of the people up here who are doing this work. I know how painful and difficult it is, and that everybody's doing public service. And so, as I campaign and as I work in Congress, I'm going to seek lines of unity. I really do love people, and I really like to work with people, and no matter what their political opinions are, and want to get past all of the factionalism and gridlock in life and get us all going together.
Thank you. Jan Roberts?
Yes, well, I'm quite proud of myself. I got in from D.C. at midnight tonight. Woke up at 6 or 5 o'clock, went to work. I run a stock brokerage firm, and here I am. So there you are. It's a question of endurance. I'm doing fine, thank you. The point is that I spend a lot of time, 5 times a year. I go back to D.C. and I just come back meeting with the, this time I met with the SEC commissioner, talking about the Frank Dodd Act and other measures that are raising the cost of doing business in the United States and chasing, maybe business chasing it overseas. And also, and over the past few years, I've worked with the House committee chairman, minority, and both sides, Republican, Democrat. And so I've been able to try to get things. There's another candidate who's not here who gets things done. That's what he says anyhow. But he's a state guy. I get things done on the federal level. I've made some, and went along with committees that I'm on, have made the progress at the federal level getting things done. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacey Lawson?
So I don't know how much time any of you spend in Washington, but even 5 years ago, there was an environment where there would be healthy partisan debate across the aisle, but then folks would go to dinner together, or they'd have a drink in the bar together afterwards. That's how deals were made and solutions for the American people were actually moved through. Today in Washington, that's not happening at all. It's vitriolic. It is scary, actually, that the sides don't even want to be in the same room together, and that means no solutions are moving forward for the American people. So I think it's really incumbent upon your next congressperson to be investing in rebuilding relationships in a way that don't cede the ground of the ideology that we care about. Our socialist contract and getting our economy going are essential parts of rebuilding the American dream. Those have to be fought for. but it has to be done in a way where those relationships are being rebuilt, where there is a reaching out across the aisle to see where can we meet, where can we find common ground, how can we hold our ideology but make sure that solutions are being formed that can move the ball forward, because we're feeling our politics is corrupt and dirty right now. We know that the approval ratings are so low, and I think we need to be rebuilding those relationships to bring them back around.
Thank you. Larry Fritzlin?
Oh my God, as a family therapist, Washington is a mess. I mean, it's just embarrassing that our democracy, the rest of the world looks at us, and I'm embarrassed. So I think right off the bat, we got to start sitting down and working things out. I agree with Stacy. The guys used to sit down, have a drink, and figure things out. Right now, they're so bought off by the left and the right, the special interests, the corporations, the unions. They're all standing up and fighting for their particular cause. We got to get money out of politics. We got to grow up. I wrote a book called Intervention on America, a how-to manual for getting America into recovery and replacing all elected officials in the fall of 2012. It's like so embarrassing what's going on. We could take you people and go back there, common sense grown up, left, right, center, grown up common sense people that aren't beholden to the money, the 1%, the unions, the corporations, the whatever, to be able to just sit down and work out common sense solutions. It's not that big of a deal. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to repeat the question. What specifically will you do to improve the climate of cooperation and civility in Congress? And that is Norman Solomon next.
Well, every day I would endeavor to do what I've done for decades, which is to try to live up to, as Barack Obama articulated, I think, very well, the principle that we can disagree without being disagreeable. And to me that means that we're very clear at all times, as best we can, the difference between civility and capitulation. And to realize that, I'm not going to define civility as if somebody wants to cut Social Security, I'm going to say, okay, well, I'll meet you part way. No, we have to stand for something. And so on the one hand, I'm going to differ from those who say, well, if you're not going to capitulate, you have to be uncivil and you have to yell at people and be abusive. I'm not going to agree with that. But I'm also not going to agree with the idea that if you're going to be civil, that means you have to give ground to those who want to slash our budgets and make war and ravage our environment. So I think clarity there will be very helpful.
Thank you. Dr. Susan Adams.
Thank you. Well, I think the cure is send a nurse to Washington to heal the house. Okay? Because we have some skills. Nurses have skills. We know how to communicate with people in their darkest times. We know how to help them solve problems. And as a local government elected person, I have brought opposing people together to solve some really difficult problems. I was the swing vote that launched our Marin Clean Energy program. I'm actually not just promising you platitudes, I've delivered the goods. I've had some meetings with the Arcata council members, some of the Arcata council members, and how we can do this together in the whole district. And that's very exciting. I think that when we are talking about budgets, I've balanced a budget. I don't take the pension plan. I don't take the car allowance. I have to make decisions about pensions. And for 10 years, I have led a very ethical life in local government that will translate itself when I get to Washington. And in our county, we have a healthy reserve. We're dealing with our pension issues. So I'm going to tackle those budget issues.
Thank you very much. Dr. William Courtney.
You folks are the solution to precipice politics. You need to go to termlimits.org, sign up, and you need to sign up your neighbors. The Constitution called for a two-year term. We have Congress people that are there for 48 years. You end up raising money. You have to raise so much money that you end up being supported by Raytheon, Halliburton, Chevron, whoever is your local kind of individual that wants to buy a congressman. So the longer you're in the process and become dependent, the more you end up supporting them, and you end up with folks that stand toe-to-toe because they represent an interest. Term limits are essential. Works for the president, works for the state assembly, will work for Congress, would work for the Supreme Court, because Thornton was a case that was decided. 23 states did not want career politicians representing them. Supreme Court struck down the law in all 23 states and said, by the time corporations picked a person, groomed them, got in place, they don't want to be turning this over and over. We need fresh faces.
Thank you. Mike Hallowell?
I believe I have the longest political track record of any of the candidates in this race. I go back to before 1970 even, when I was running as a ticket mate with Ronald Reagan, and we were against the establishment of the Republican Party, who wanted to put all the Republicans in totally Republican districts so they could preserve their seats, even though we could never control the legislature that way and pass our legislation, but it was a career for them. I stood with Reagan. Reagan won. We got some decent seats out of the deal. I think the key to civility is occasionally reaching out to the other side when they've got something in their favor. I take great pride in the fact that in 1978 there was a Briggs initiative to keep gay people from teaching in schools. It was overwhelmingly supported by Republicans, but Ronald Reagan stood up against it. He turned it around, and that was defeated. And that's why there was such a thing as Reagan Democrats. They respected him for his civility and integrity.
Thank you. Tiffany Renee?
Thank you. I come from a very diverse family, both politically and culturally. My grandparents were very staunch Republicans, and my mother was anti-nuclear activist and environmentalist. So dinner conversations around the family table were quite interesting, and it has given me quite a lot of resilience and patience to move through what the wedge issues are to get at the core of what our common goals and values are. And we need to have people and leaders in DC who can do that now more than ever. And as someone that is running a campaign as if it were publicly financed with very minimal money, I don't have the baggage that many other candidates do when I go to DC. I will be representing the people and the needs of this district and working on the common goals and values that we all need to address to keep America strong. Thank you.
Thank you. In order to leave time for our candidates to have their closing statements, this will be our last question. I will mention a couple of the topics before you have your closing statements in case any of you wish to comment on them. So, this question has to do with senior services. Funding has been cut to the Labor Department, which funds the Senior Community Employment Service that provides training in nonprofits and supports job search. Would you please comment on this? And we will begin with Dr. Susan Adams.
Is this our last, or this is the last question?
The last question, okay, before your closing statement.
Okay. Say it one more time.
Funding has been cut to the Labor Department, which funds the Senior Community Employment Service that provides training in nonprofits and supports job search. What are your comments about this?
Thank you. What we have found in our county, we have probably the highest proportion of aging population, rapidly aging population. And what we have found is that tapping into the wisdom and the experiences of our seniors has actually been a really important, vital part of our workforce. We have about $15 million worth of in-kind contributions coming in terms of workforce in our court systems and health and human services from our seniors that are re-engaging back into public life. And for those programs where there are subsidies, if the feds haven't been helping, our county has been working with the Workforce Investment Board to try to find those resources within our general fund to help support the lower income seniors that need a little bump. And it's been a really wonderful program. It's helped to give the seniors a little bit more income coming in so that they can deal with the rising costs of what's going on in our communities. And in our community, it's pretty expensive cost of living in the southern part.
Thank you. Larry Fritzland?
For the record, I've lived in this district 30 years, and I've also been a proud member of the United Brotherhood of Teamsters, United Auto Workers, and the Teachers Union. So it's a tragedy that we are way down the list of nations in taking care of the needy. That needs to change. And I'll say it again, we have plenty of money. Gandhi said there is enough money for every man's need, not enough for every man's greed. We have to get money out of politics, the 1%, the hyper-wealthy, the special interest are buying off the politicians. It's well known, and we need to see past that. We need to elect honorable Republicans and honorable Democrats, those that will not accept money and will sit down and work things out. A healthy family is a combination of coming together and support for individuation. I see the coming together as healthy Democrats. I see the healthy independents standing on our own 2 feet, strong local government, as the Republican part. We need to get past politics and begin fixing things. Thank you.
Thank you. John Llewellyn?
Well, retirement's just too boring, I'll tell you that. And so here I am. And I really think that would be a good thing if the Labor Department help us find jobs. It's just the way that everything's being whittled away and fed to the wrong places, which a lot of us have been talking about all day. I'm glad I'm not the only senior up here. Yeah, when Mike Hollowell was with Reagan in the early 70s, I was writing a book called Ecology of Devastation, Indochina, and organizing the Convention on Ecocidal War in Stockholm, Sweden. So I've been politically active for a while. I want to encourage everybody here to also get politically active and see if we can get some of this funding coming back to things we really need instead of things that are destroying ourselves, other people, and the planet.
Thank you. Mike Hallowell?
You know where I stand on keeping people working as long as they can, and this program cut is exactly the wrong thing on that particular issue. By continuing to work, they put a little bit extra into the Social Security Trust Fund and help the other people who are in full retirement. I was strongly opposed to this payroll tax holiday, whereby it was a tax cut for the middle class, according to Obama. Social Security contributions make Social Security an earned entitlement. What Obama wanted was to tax the millionaires so that they could pay for the Social Security benefits. That cuts the political support right out from underneath the program. It's no longer an earned entitlement. I will stand up for Social Security, even against Democrats who used to be the defenders of the thing, who are really gutting it by depriving of its entitlement status. So basically, we need to get the funding to keep the seniors in the workforce to the extent possible.
Thank you. Stacy Lawson?
So I hope I've communicated today that as your next Congresswoman, I would be a huge advocate and supporter for services for our seniors and older Americans. And I think one of the things that we need to ensure is that the gifts and talents of our older Americans are employed as long as possible. If folks want to stay in the workforce, that we actually enable them the services and support to do that, especially as our economy is recovering. We need the gifts and talents of all of our citizens. And I would say, I would even go a step further. There was actually a case by the Supreme Court a few years ago around age discrimination. And I think we actually need new legislation that protects against age discrimination just as much as we do around sexual orientation, race or color, or other things in terms of equality in the workforce, to make sure that older Americans have the services, the access, the support, and the fairness that they need to stay employed if they choose to, and to be members of our recovering economy so that we all benefit from that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question. Funding has been cut to the Labor Department, which funds the Senior Community Employment Service, which provides training in nonprofits and supports job search. Your comments about that, please. And we will go to Dan Roberts.
Thank you. So it doesn't surprise me if you look at the federal government's reaction to a declining revenue, that they're cutting services. I think what we're seeing is a resizing of government, and I think we should wake up and understand that's what's going on. And also in California, there's a resizing of government. It should go on. It is going on. So there's no mystery there. That's what's going on. In terms of, I agree with Larry that we need honorable folks elected to office, and I would hope to do that and ask for your vote. In terms of connectivity, I hire off the web. That's in my business, so I use connectivity, and maybe that'd be better than the the Labor Department, maybe private sector. I look for private sector solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany Renee?
Well, private sector solutions don't always address the real core issues. We need to stop the funding cuts. We need to bring our defense dollars back home, continue to put people to work. We can do this through Senior Corps, continuing to fund the programs that are helping seniors to find employment. We need to stop relying on Walmart to employ our seniors. And, that whole form of retail establishment is what's eroding our communities and the ability to provide the services that are necessary for all workers. USDA has a redevelopment program, economic development program. That's going to be vital as well for rural communities. And then additionally in Petaluma, we've worked on our economic development plan, and we have people that are able to address where the gaps are in services and communications, because sometimes departments don't communicate well with each other, and so addressing that as well is going to be essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Norman Solomon?
Well, whether it's Labor Department grants to nonprofits that help seniors or grants from other departments in the federal government, these cuts are often deadly, unfortunately sometimes literally, in our communities. And if we're going to resize, we should be resizing up those programs as we resize down the Pentagon spending. Part of my orientation is I spent 13 years as the founding executive director of a nonprofit, a 501c3, the Institute for Public Accuracy, and I worked very closely with a lot of directors and board members of nonprofit organizations in California around the country. And I want to make a more general statement here. Many nonprofits are trying to shoulder out of necessity a burden that is just too big. The poverty, the lack of transportation, adequate health care. We can't burden nonprofits and then not give them the resources that they need to do their job. The federal government has to step up to the plate.
Thank you. Andy Caffrey?
As I mentioned earlier, we seem to be haunted by this piecemeal approach to taking care of each other, and we have to fight all these tiny little fires. I also mentioned that I don't think we're going to see any real security in those programs unless we do something very different. I don't know what electing another 20 Lynn Woolseys or Dennis Kuciniches is going to do. The Progressive Caucus is the largest caucus in the House, and we've just seen the Democrats let everything fail. So I think that what we have to do is have a program of inclusiveness where we don't segregate everything into programs. We have lifetime free education. We have these kinds of nonprofit programs for everybody. We make sure that we define the things that we are worried about, and then we set about setting up programs that will take care of them, the problems that the market is not taking care of. That's what government's for, doing what the market can't do.
Thank you. Dr. William Courtney?
Seniors have the experience. Some of them have been through the Depression, some of them have perspective, some have been through Hemp for Victory. We need them to be involved, and we need them to be employed, and if they can work in the home, we need to be able to structure it so that they can bring their experience to folks that can come to them to learn from them. Excellent program. The West program down in Mendocino relies heavily on the senior experience to kind of guide and assist the startup businesses. So we need the funding, and if we don't have the funding, then we need to get the local community together and show what a valuable resource this is, and we need to reach out. If the seniors cannot get out of their home, we need to go to them to learn the vast experience and be able to apply that, because we're going to need all of our resources as we go forward. I've been to China. I've seen manufacturing over there. We need to find a new way of doing business. We need emerging technologies. We need internet connections. We need everyone to kind of look for a way to exist in this world.
Thank you. Some of the topics that you had questions about that we did not get to address: Romney Rule versus Buffett Rule, Windfall Elimination Provision, or WEP, Gut Pension Offset, GPO, large agribusiness subsidies, rail system in Humboldt County, calling in foreign taxes to balance the budget, and when or if you would support attack by U.S. or Israel against Iran. If you wish to address any of those in your 1-minute closing, you're certainly welcome to do so. But I will give you one that you all can address, and that is your hometown. Everybody wants to know where you come from. And we are beginning with Dr. Dr. Susan Adams. 1 minute.
All right. Well, what you need to know about me is I'm a professor of nursing, a women's health nurse practitioner, a mom, a grandmom, and a local policymaker who's been very successful doing my homework, bringing people together to solve complicated problems, delivering the goods, balancing budgets. I'm the best candidate for this job. I've been battle trained and, in front of the community that has oftentimes not treated us very well from the dais. But I'm not a Meg Whitman candidate with a lot of money. My money is small donors, most of it. It comes from inside of the district, not outside of the district. And I'm really proud of the fact that I have nurses and social workers and teachers and people supporting me and out knocking on doors with me in this effort. I have, as I said, the experience that money can't buy, and I have deep roots in this community. I'm from, right now, I've been living for 25 years in Marinwood in Marin County, where I serve on the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you very much. John Llewellyn.
Yes, I'm a wild seaweed harvester from Mendocino County. I've been hand harvesting seaweed for over 30 years as a livelihood, a gourmet food. I love this district, and I'm devoted to restoring the watersheds. It was so great driving up here, watching all that water come down the Eel. I'm looking forward to seeing those dams moved out and to seeing the people who using that river downstream join us, because I love this whole district. It's all part of my body. I'm one of you. If you elect me, you're going to be electing somebody who comes from this community. You can go to johnllewelynforcongress.org and see that I'm working on several topics, including restoring the fisheries. I'm endorsed by the Shelter Cove mosquito fleet. The hook and line fishermen of Shelter Cove are behind me all the way.
Thank you very much. Dan Roberts.
Thank you. 40-year resident of the new merged district. I live in Tiburon, the same home for 40 years, which is sort of a record there. Raised 3 children. In business, finance, 40 years, 25 years with my own firm. So I've hired folks, made plans, balanced budget, paid bills, right? And no bailout, my goodness. And I'm in financial services. Well, because I stuck to my knitting, right? I didn't get involved with those heavily leveraged products that the Goldman, et cetera, got involved with, and it required our money to bail them out. So that's where I am. I went to public schools, product of public schools, and got a master's from Loyola Chicago, and then came back to Tiburon and started my business 40 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Hallowell.
I'm a retired college professor. I was born in Los Angeles, and I'm now living in Sonoma County. I can't afford to live in Marin County, where I had some family roots, but Marin County has the highest rate of breast cancer among women still in the workforce, and my wife's battle against breast cancer is very vital to me, and the Marin County Public Health Department, with their great concern about this particular issue, has been very helpful. I feel very strongly about freedom of choice in healthcare because if Hillary Care had been adopted, as Lynn Woolsey tried to get it adopted, it might have cost my wife her life. It might not have detected the breast cancer. Hillary Care didn't allow mammograms for women under 50. You basically have a standardized one-size-fits-all regimen that is part of the standard benefits package. My wife is doing very fine now with innovative care, and I believe this whole district is unified by respect for the environment and respect for individuals, and we need to all work together to maintain that respect.
Thank you. Dr. William Courtney.
Psychiatrist for 23 years. I have a lot of training in conflict resolution, which could come in handy in Washington, but I think it's way beyond that. Interested in individuals, people, because the people are going to have to be very involved in the changes. Term limits for congressmen is not going to come out of Congress. Clean energy is not going to come out of Congress. There's a lot of things that have to be done because the people decide that they're going to participate. A friend of mine asked me if I would approve of his use of cannabis. I denied him. 5 years later, I'm an international expert on non-psychoactive dietary. It's a raw vegetable, a phenomenal raw vegetable. You have to heat it, and no other animal does that. It's been around for 34 million years, tremendous anti-inflammatory. I've got kids with cancer, I've got kids with Dravet's, I have people calling me from around the world with cancer and seizure disorders and ALS. I'm an expert in this area. It really is an asset that we really should be proud of. We're creating strains right now that are 22% CBD. And,
thank you very much. Tiffany Renee.
Thank you. I have lived in Sonoma County for the past 22 years, mostly in Petaluma, except when I went to the junior college for about a year. I have been connected to this district in Mendocino and Bodega Bay since I was a small child. We spent a lot of time on the coast looking for property and camping, and eventually owned property in Mendocino for a time as well. So I'm very connected to this district and to the coast. I have 20 years of public service background, working in my community, understanding the needs of this district is an important part of being a representative. Being out in the community is something that I cherish and will continue to do for you as your next Congresswoman. So please take a look at my resume on this sheet out in the front and get to know my background. It's a lot more than just a minute. I've been working very hard and want to continue to work hard for you. So please vote for me when it comes time in June. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Fritzlin.
This is the hardest thing I've ever done, and I look at the crew up here, and I know that they've worked really hard, and there's some really brilliant people up here with some brilliant ideas. I'm honored to be part of this process. Did I say I live in Mill Valley? I have for 25 years. I believe I have a special message here. Shades of it have been echoed by some of the other people, but if you want people that are going to do what we've been doing, there's some candidates that are strong in that. My pledge is to go back there and piss a lot of people off, because I think that there's rampant corruption, the backroom deals, left and right, and my website for my campaign that spells everything out is larryfritzlin.com. And my recent book, We Are the 99% and We're Running for Office, Washington's Worst Nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Caffrey.
If you think about it, there's no such thing as a millionaire or billionaire who honestly and harmlessly earn their money. That's because our economy is set up to externalize most of the costs. Externalize the cost to the environment, externalize healthcare costs to those who aren't strong enough to challenge the corporations. So we also have to look at the fact that we spent $10 trillion on the Cold War, $3 to $5 trillion on these wars. So I have no problem taxing the rich to pay for all of these things that we need to do. They've got $3 trillion they didn't deserve. Most of the other candidates here are presenting a program to you, though, as if there is no climate crisis, as if there isn't a deadline that we have to meet before these ice caps break up. I'm the only one who actually can tell you how much time we have and how much change we have to make. And to answer your question, Dan, about the fare box, 90% of the HTA is already paid for by the government. BART, essentially, this is maybe 10, 15 years ago I heard this, but BART, essentially the money that is raised in the fares only pays for the cost of collecting the fares.
Thank you very much. Stacy Lawson.
Thank you again, everyone, for being here this afternoon. I'm Stacy Lawson, and I would be absolutely honored to be your next representative in Congress. I come from a small rural town. As the daughter of a truck driver, a granddaughter of a mill worker, my hometown was Port Angeles, Washington. I moved to California over 21 years ago and have been a resident here, and I live in San Rafael. I I'm fighting in this campaign and in Congress to rebuild our middle class. It has been slipping away, and we need to restore our economy. We need to restore the kind of high-wage middle-class jobs that allow us to put our kids through college and to have a secure retirement, to take care of our older Americans and our veterans and make sure our social safety net is strong. Our economy has to be strong. I come with 20 years of economic development expertise. I teach our young people around the economy. We are endorsed by Emily's List and Women's Campaign Fund and State Senator Noreen Evans, elected officials up and down the district. And I will also share with you that, like some of my colleagues up here, I have forsaken any corporate money or corporate PAC money. We are taking only from individuals, and our campaign is funded exclusively by you, individual voters, and I welcome your vote.
Thank you very much. Norman Solomon.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to everybody for being so welcoming. My wife Cheryl and I have lived for 15 years on Tomales Bay in Inverness Park, and I feel real affinity up and down the coast with coastal communities. I want to mention that as an independent progressive Democrat, although one party, you might say, has given faith a bad name lately, I feel a profound faith in democracy. And our campaign is based on that. You can learn a lot more by visiting SolomonForCongress.com. We have metrics, if you will, that no other campaign can come close to in terms of being a grassroots leader. We have 950 volunteers. We have 4,300 different individuals who've contributed to our campaign. That's 98% of the money we've gotten has come from those 4,300 individuals. So again, SolomonForCongress.com. Look forward to working with you, and thanks again for the chance to be here today.
Thank you very much. A number of the candidates have their own literature. It is the League does not allow literature to be distributed during the forum, in the forum, but they can have them outside if you want to pick up their literature. All candidates can put their answers to the 4 questions on their own website or on Smart Voter when that is up and running. And in the back there's a table with League of Women Voters handouts and registration forms. If you are not registered to vote, you have until May 21st to do it for the June election, so be sure if you've changed your party or your address or you've never been registered, please do that before May 21st. I would like to thank the Area 1 Agency on Aging and the Humboldt Senior Resource Center for putting this together and for providing the venue. Thank you to the League members Carol Ziskin, Richard Lehman, Carol Masterson, Helen Huey, Kay Escarda, Nan Niebuhr for their help today. Thank you to Access Humboldt for taping this forum so that others in the community will be able to see it at another time. Thank you to all of you for being an attentive audience and for your thoughtful questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to a lot more of them. If you want to stay till 8 o'clock tonight, maybe we could. And a very big thank you to all the candidates for your willingness to run for an important elective office and for taking the time to answer the questions. Please be sure that you are registered to vote and vote on June 5th. Make democracy work. Thank you.